They pegged him for an easy mark. A lone man in a quiet roadside diner, unassuming, out of place. But when the bikers pushed their luck, they learned quick. Some fights are over before they even start. That late afternoon, the wind cut cold as Mark pulled into the gravel lot of Maddie's Diner, a weathered spot clinging to the edge of an old highway just outside Flagstaff. Time moved slower there. Maybe it never moved at all, and the kind of folks who wandered in weren't always welcomed with smiles. The neon "open" sign flickered weakly in the dusty window, barely alive, while an ancient gas station nearby stood like a relic, its pumps rusted into memory. Mark shut off the engine, sat still for a second, then grabbed his wallet and baseball cap before heading in. Inside, it was all as expected. Checkered floors, cracked vinyl booths, and a jukebox long dead in the corner. The air was thick with the bitter mix of burnt coffee and stale fryer grease. A weary waitress scrubbed a spotless counter, murmuring to the cook without lifting her eyes. As Mark stepped through the door, the entry bell gave a sharp jangle that turned heads. Not kindly, not curious, just cold and suspicious. Over in the corner, a pack of bikers sat draped in leather, sunglasses still on despite the dim interior. Their laughter stopped the second Mark walked in. He didn't flinch, just adjusted his cap, kept his shoulders loose, and slid into a booth by the window. Always face the exits, old habit. The waitress shuffled over, pen tapping her pad like it might crack under the pressure. "What'll it be?" she asked, voice flat. "Cheeseburger and fries. Coffee, black," Mark replied, quiet but clear. She scribbled the order, not meeting his eyes, glancing nervously toward the bikers now watching him like wolves eyeing an outsider. Mark didn't return the stare. He simply sat, calm, fingertips grazing the rim of his cup, as if nothing around him mattered. But it did matter. The atmosphere thickened, sharp with tension. One of the bikers, a hulking man with a tangled beard and tattooed knuckles, leaned back in his chair and called out loud enough to carry. "Well, look at that. We got us a tourist." His pals snickered. Mark stayed quiet. The bearded man pushed again. "Hey, buddy, you deaf or just rude?" The waitress returned with the coffee, hand shaking as she set it down. Mark gave her a soft smile and a quiet, "Thank you." This wasn't her fight. No reason she should stay in it. And she didn't. She turned fast, retreating behind the counter. Mark sipped his coffee, every eye in the place burning into him. He hadn't said much, but the diner had already split into sides. A truck rumbled past outside, crunching gravel. Inside, the silence was charged, like a fuse waiting for the spark. The air felt thinner by the second. Then the biker chuckled darkly. "Maybe he's just shy," he sneered, grinning wide. "Or maybe he's lost. Ain't much here for his kind." That one landed. The group cackled like dogs, cruel and loud. The space felt tighter, the walls closer. Mark just took another sip, like none of it touched him. Not a twitch, not a blink. His calm only stoked their fire. Then came the scrape, a chair dragging across the floor. The bearded man stood, boots heavy as he stalked forward. The rest leaned back, hungry for the show. Behind the counter, the waitress froze. The biker loomed beside Mark's booth, the stench of sweat and cheap smokes rolling off his vest. "Hey," he growled, "I'm talking to you, boy." The word sliced through the air, sharp, deliberate. Mark set his cup down with care. "Something I can help you with?" he asked, voice low, steady, not a threat, not a challenge, just a question. And that pause, that calm delivery, made the biker falter. "You're sitting where you don't belong," he said, eyes narrowing. "Don't you know how things work around here?" Behind him, the pack chuckled. Another one, a wiry guy with greasy hair, getting ready to rise. But Mark hadn't moved yet, and they still didn't know what they'd just stepped into. They figured he'd be an easy mark, a quiet guy, alone in a backwater diner, but they were wrong. Real wrong. That afternoon, the wind slicing sharp through the Arizona plains, Lucas pulled his dusty pickup into the gravel lot of Jenny's Diner, a run-down little place hugging the side of Route 17, the kind of spot where time didn't pass, it just settled. The neon "open" sign blinked weakly behind a fogged-up window, barely hanging on, much like the rusted-out gas station next door, its pumps long forgotten. Lucas killed the engine, took a slow breath, then grabbed his wallet and trucker cap, heading inside with the kind of ease that didn't ask for attention, but drew it anyway. Inside, the air was thick with burnt coffee and fryer grease, checkerboard tiles scuffed raw, and a jukebox that hadn't played since the '80s. A weary waitress scrubbed at a spotless counter, muttering to the cook, while in the back corner a pack of bikers lounged in cracked leather and dark shades, their laughter dying the second Lucas stepped through the door. He didn't flinch, just tipped his cap, eyes scanning the room before settling into a booth that let him watch the exits. Old habits. When the waitress approached, her pen jittering against her notepad, he asked simply for a cheeseburger, fries, and coffee. Black. She scribbled it down, avoiding his gaze, her eyes flicking nervously toward the bikers now watching him like wolves circling something unfamiliar. One of them, thick-bearded, tattooed knuckles, boots planted wide, leaned back in his chair and barked out, "Look what we got here. A tourist." His voice dripped with mockery, drawing low chuckles from the others. Lucas didn't respond, just wrapped his hands around the coffee cup as it arrived, murmured a soft thanks to the waitress who turned and hurried away. That silence, that calm, only made them angrier. The bearded one pushed up from his seat, boots thudding across the floor. He stalked over to Lucas's booth, breath hot with cigarette stench, and growled, "I'm talking to you, boy." Lucas didn't look up, just set his cup down and said, "Something I can help you with?" His voice was steady, even polite, but carried a quiet weight. "You're in the wrong seat," the biker snapped. "Don't you know how things work around here?" Another biker jeered from behind him. "Show him, Travis. Teach him some manners." Travis, the name fit a man so desperate to prove something. Lucas sighed, barely audible. "I'm just here for lunch." That calm set Travis off. He slammed his fist on the table, rattling the salt shaker. "You deaf or just stupid?" Lucas's gaze finally rose, slow and deliberate, and met Travis's. No fear, no anger, just a stillness that unsettled. "Back off," Lucas said, quiet but unshakable. Travis sneered. Or what? The diner fell deathly silent. Not even the grill sizzled. "You're gonna learn some respect," Travis snarled, reaching for Lucas's collar. But Lucas moved, fast. He caught Travis's wrist midair, grip like iron. "Don't," he warned, soft but firm. Travis yanked free, stumbling back with a snarl. "Think you're tough? Boys, get up." Chairs scraped the floor. 5 bikers rose, cracking knuckles, smirking. Lucas didn't move, didn't blink. The waitress trembled behind the counter, reaching for the phone. "Don't," Travis barked, and she froze. He turned back, eyes locked on Lucas. "Two choices. Walk out, or we take this outside." Lucas calmly placed his coffee back on its saucer. "I'd rather finish my lunch." Travis grinned like he'd already won. "Fine. then we'll do it here." The others formed a half circle around the booth, convinced they had him cornered. But they didn't. Not even close. Travis stepped forward, fists clenched. "Last chance, tough guy." Lucas didn't budge. His stillness was unnerving. Travis spat, "You just don't get it," and lunged. But to Lucas, it was slow motion. He slid out of the booth in one fluid move, caught Travis mid-swing, twisted his arm behind his back, and drove him into the table, hard. The crack of impact echoed. One down. Travis hit the floor groaning. Lucas turned to the rest. "You don't want this," he said, like he meant it. But pride wouldn't let them back down. The wiry one charged, fists flailing. Lucas stepped aside, drove an elbow into his gut, then spun him into a chair. 2 down. The last 3 hesitated. They knew now. This wasn't some brawl. This was a reckoning. The biggest of them lunged, grabbing at Lucas's shoulder. Mistake. Lucas twisted, caught the arm, and dropped him like a sack of bricks. And just like that, the whole diner knew. This man hadn't come looking for trouble, but he damn sure wasn't scared of it. The bell over the door barely had time to settle before Cody swept the last biker off his feet with a clean, fluid leg sweep. Before the guy could react, Cody dropped to one knee, pressing it into his back and whispering, "Stay down." The man went still, chest heaving, too winded to argue. That made 4. Another biker came from behind, wheeled in a chair like some barroom cartoon. Sloppy, wild. Cody ducked without effort, stood, yanked the chair free, and shoved him square into a booth where he landed in a gasping heap. 4 down, 1 to go. The last biker froze, eyes darting between his crumpled friends and the man who hadn't so much as broken a sweat. Cody tilted his head, calm as ever, silently asking, "Still want this?" That was all it took. The biker backed up, turned, and bolted through the front door, the bell shrieking above him as he disappeared into the parking lot. 5 down. Silence swallowed the diner. Cody stood there, adjusting his worn baseball cap, eyes scanning the wreckage, the moaning bodies, the upended chairs, the stunned faces. Travis, still hunched over the table with busted pride and sore ribs, looked up at him in disbelief. Cody met his eyes and said quietly, "Told you to back off." It wasn't the fight anyone would remember. It was that moment after. Nobody moved. The air felt heavy, too thick for sound. The waitress still had her hand on the phone, never having dialed. The cook peered out from the kitchen, spatula limp in hand. Cody straightened like a man who'd just stood from tying his boots, nothing more. Travis groaned, pushing himself part way up, blinking like a man waking from a bad dream. "What the hell? Who are you?" he muttered. Cody looked down at him, unreadable. "Just a guy getting lunch," he replied. Travis coughed, spat blood, and glared. "You ain't normal. What are you?" Cody glanced around the diner, saw not fear in the stares, but awe, respect. No one was used to someone that still, that controlled. He sighed and said, "You don't want to know." One of the other bikers wheezed from the floor. "Military or something?" Cody didn't answer. He turned back to his booth, where his burger and fries sat untouched, coffee still steaming. He picked up a fry, took a bite like nothing had happened. The waitress finally stepped forward, voice shaky. "Sir, are you okay?" Cody gave her a soft, genuine smile. "I'm fine, ma'am." She blinked, startled by how polite he sounded after dropping 5 grown men. She looked at the mess, then back at him. "I'll get you a fresh burger." Cody shook his head. "This one's just fine." From a corner booth, an old man with weathered skin and a quiet southern drawl muttered, "I ain't never seen anything like that." Cody ignored the rising whispers. He knew what they were thinking. In a world full of noise, a calm man echoes the loudest. He pulled a few bills from his pocket, slid them under the plate, and stood. The sound of his boots across the tile echoed louder than the fight. As he reached the door, the waitress called out, "Wait, who are you really?" Cody paused, one hand on the handle. He glanced back, held her gaze just a second longer than needed, and with a faint, knowing smile said, "Just a guy who knows how to finish his lunch." The door jingled softly as he stepped out. Gravel crunched beneath his boots as he walked to his pickup. The biker who'd run stood by his bike, frozen. He didn't speak, just stepped aside. Cody climbed into the truck, engine rumbling to life, its growl the only thing that broke the eerie stillness. He glanced in the rearview mirror one last time at the diner and the people inside, their eyes following him like he was part ghost, part legend. Then he drove off down the empty stretch of road. The bruises would fade, sure, but the memory, the lesson, that would stick. You never judge a man by how he looks. It doesn't matter how a man talks or where he's from. Sometimes it's the quiet ones you should never test. And for the folks inside that roadside diner off a forgotten stretch of Route 48, the story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. That little place would never be the same. Word spread fast, faster than the coffee cooled. It became the kind of tale folks pass along at backyard BBQs, on job sites, over late-night calls. "Yeah, I was there," someone might say, eyes wide. The guy barely moved, took those bikers down like he was swatting flies, like it was nothing. Another would nod, didn't even flinch, calm as a lake in winter. The waitress had her version too. She'd retell it with a shaky voice, saying how still he was, how precise. "I asked who he was," she'd recall, "and you know what he said? Just a guy getting lunch." But the lesson ran deeper than any headline. The bruises would heal for those bikers, sure, but the shame? That stuck. Travis, the loudmouth, the one who started it all, didn't say much for a long while after. Any time someone brought up that day, his face would flush, and he'd mutter, "Forget about it." But he never really did. None of them did. That moment shattered their swagger, taught them that real strength isn't in numbers or noise, it's in knowing you could but choosing not to, unless you're left no choice. As for Daryl, he wasn't chasing stories. He didn't care about the whispers. To him, it was simple. Treat folks with respect, stay in your lane, and if someone pushes too far, you handle it. Not with rage, but with restraint. Somewhere out on that endless highway, Daryl drove on, the sun slipping down like a curtain behind the hills. He wasn't thinking about the diner anymore, or the men on the floor. His mind wandered to his time as a Navy SEAL, the operations that stayed buried in classified files, the lives he'd saved without a thank you. That's what mattered to him. Not the spotlight, not the credit, just doing what needed to be done. A scratchy old tune played low on the truck's radio, the kind that makes you forget where the road ends. A few miles later, he pulled into a quiet gas station, stretched his legs, grabbed a bottle of water. Behind the counter stood a kid, maybe 17, earbuds slung around his neck. "You headed somewhere important?" he asked, more out of curiosity than anything. Daryl offered a half smile, tossed a couple bills on the counter. "Nah, just passing through." The kid nodded, but his eyes lingered. He could feel something in the man's presence. "You military or something?" he asked. Daryl paused just a beat, then gave a slight shrug. "Just a guy getting water." and that was it. He walked back out, climbed into his truck, and rolled off into the distance. The kid stood there, staring out the window, unsure what he felt. Respect, maybe, or just a strange sense that he'd brushed against something rare. And, like that, Darryl was gone. Just another mile marker in the rear view. Another town, another road. He didn't need a pat on the back, didn't want one. But for the people left behind, his quiet strength lingered like the echo of thunder after a storm, a reminder that the loudest man in the room isn't always the strongest. That power doesn't come from shouting, but from silence backed by grit. That sometimes the ones who speak the least are the ones who've seen the most. Respect isn't claimed by volume or threat. It's earned in calm, in discipline, in restraint. And the calmest people? They've usually fought the hardest battles. So next time you think you've got someone figured out, think again. Because the strongest ones, they don't need to prove a thing. If this story hit home, pass it on. And if you want more reminders of what really matters, you know where to find us.